Chris Grier makes another move, and I think Dolphins fans will like this one. Tyrel Dodson, the linebacker, has re-signed with the Miami Dolphins on a 2-year deal. I am very excited about this move. I've clamored for the Dolphins to re-sign Dodson all offseason long. It's a 2-year, $8.25 million deal, so only $4.1 million per season. I thought a deal was likely going to be 2 years, $9 million, so it comes in slightly less than anticipated. But Dodson, someone the Dolphins picked up on waivers from Seattle last season to replace David Long Jr., I thought he fit in really nice with that Anthony Weaver defense alongside Jordan Brooks. I am pumped that he is back. And if you are pumped that Tyrel Dodson is back for this Dolphins defense on a 2-year deal, hit that thumbs up icon. I know it hasn't been splash moves for Miami, but I think Chris Grier is starting to put together a solid off-season, at least in free agency, getting guys that fit this system, fit this organization on cheap contracts. Hit that thumbs up icon if you're excited for Tyrel Dodson. And I've been saying all offseason long, when I said perfect offseason plan, my ideal free agent targets, at the linebacker 2 position, I always wanted Tyrel Dodson. And I know there was a lot of buzz out there about the Dolphins going out and getting Dre Greenlaw. Now, if Dre Greenlaw would have come to Miami on a cheaper price tag, yes, I would have preferred Dre Greenlaw over Tyrel Dodson. I'm not going to try to sit up here and act like I think Dodson is better than Greenlaw, because when Greenlaw is healthy, he is a top 10, top 15 linebacker in football. That's what we saw in 22 and 23. But the issue is that he's had an injury. He's coming off of a torn Achilles in the Super Bowl of that 2023 season. He had injuries in 2021 as well. So him signing a $12 million deal essentially with Denver doesn't shock me he got that price tag, and it doesn't shock me Miami wasn't able to get him at that number. But Dodson came in, played 5 games for the Dolphins after being claimed, started in week 12, and then had to fill in for Anthony Walker Jr. due to injuries. And he had an up and down kind of run stopping, if you will. Like if you look at his PFF numbers in terms of his tackling, it was up and down. But the part that makes me excited with Tyrel Dodson is his ability to cover. I mean, for the Dolphins in those 5 games, he only allowed 112 receiving yards, a 76.5 completion percentage, and 8.6 yards per reception. I think that is relatively good for a linebacker. He has good range, sideline to sideline athleticism that I really enjoy. And you can also make the note, yeah, he had 3 interceptions last season for the Miami Dolphins in the 5 games that he played. He had a QB rating total, by the way, being targeted of 53.7. So yeah, although he did have some tackling issues, a missed tackle percentage of 14%, missed 6 tackles in that 5-game span, which is not great. 3 of them did come against the Green Bay Packers on that nightmarish Thanksgiving game, where you can just sit up here and say that every single player on that Dolphins defense struggled in that game against Green Bay. But you take that one away, and he played pretty well for the most part. So I think this is a really good signing. I'm excited for Tyrel Dodson to be back. He slots in as your starting linebacker too. Miami will probably not be done adding to this linebacker room. I would expect them to draft one in late April, but I would not expect them to go out and sign another high-profile linebacker. So I think we could stop talking about that. You have your starting 2. Channing Tindall is still technically under contract, so we'll see if he's given a shot to be LB3 or LB4 this season on a draft as well. I think that's a very interesting possibility for the Miami Dolphins defense, but I am very excited that Tyrel Dodson is back. This is why you subscribe to the channel, because I've said all offseason long that Dodson is someone that I want to retain, want to bring back, and we eventually did. So that makes me happy. We'll cover a new video with it, so hit that sub button. Now, overall, with the Dolphins offseason, I said that I think they've done a good job. I truly mean they have done a good job. Obviously, the first real signing that they had was quarterback Zach Wilson to be the backup on a 1-year, $6 million deal. I have no issue with that. I know he's split right now among the fan base, a very divisive quarterback in the NFL as a whole, former 2nd overall pick, never panned out in New York, but was very good as a backup in Denver last season. Really never played because Bo Nix was able to stay on the football football field. But Wilson looked pretty solid in the preseason. And based off what I have heard from beat reporters in Miami, beat reporters in Denver, Zach Wilson was well liked inside that locker room, well liked inside that quarterback room. And him getting to work with Sean Payton for a year tells me that I think he is starting to progress as a quarterback. Now he gets to work with Mike McDaniel. I think there's a lot of untapped stuff there with Wilson that hopefully Miami will be able to bring out of him. But ideally, he never even plays because Tua Tagovailoa plays all 17 games. Then the big signing of James Daniels, the 3-year, $24 million deal from the Pittsburgh Steelers, will be your starting right guard next season. Only has a $4 million cap hit this year, which is just massive for Miami. He was the best run blocker in all of football in the 4 or 5 games he played before he tore his Achilles. Fits the Dolphins zone run scheme as well. Big fan of James Daniels being added to this roster. He was an offensive lineman that I targeted and circled all offseason long, which you would know if you were subscribed to the channel. They also signed Larry Borum back on as a depth piece. This is a Kendall Lamb replacement, swing tackle that will back up Paul Austin Jackson, but also has versatility to potentially play left guard or right guard if some injuries pop up as well. He is not meant to be a starter. He is not anticipated to be a starter. So backup tackle, backup offensive lineman. I don't hate Larry Borum whatsoever. Then they finally got a safety, Ifeatu Melifonwu, 1-year, $4 million deal. I initially thought he was going to be safety 3 on that contract, but it kind of feels like Miami might want him to start. Why is that? Is because they made another signing at safety yesterday afternoon in the form of Ashton Davis, the former New York Jets safety who was drafted out of Cal. So now the Dolphins safety room of players on standard contracts include Melifonwu, Ashton Davis, Elijah Campbell, who re-signed, and then Patrick McMorris, who was a 6th-round pick last year in the draft. So those are the 4 safeties you have on a deal right now. And although Davis and Melifonwu are on our cheap 1-year contracts, I think Miami is not going to sign another one. I've been pounding the fist to try to get Julian Blackmon. I don't think that's ultimately going to happen after they signed Ashton Davis. I would still expect the Dolphins to draft one in the first 3 rounds, whether it's in the first round with Jahdae Barron, Nick Emmanwori, or Malachi Starks. Second-round targets like Xavier Watts, Kevin Winston. And then you could look in the 3rd round for Andrew Makuba from Texas, Jonas Sanker from Virginia, Sebastian Castro from Iowa. I would anticipate Miami going with one of those players that I just mentioned in the first 3 rounds and having that 5-man safety room be that group. Do I love it? No, but I will say it intrigues me that the Dolphins are going that way. I would have liked them to invest in a multi-year veteran starter, but as long as they hit on that draft pick in the first 3 rounds when it comes to safety, I think it's going to be a solid, pretty room. But once again, you do have to hit on that pick. And then the last signing we'll talk about on today's video, wide receiver Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. This one's a shocker, and I loved it. This one arguably is my favorite signing to this point. It's hard to top James Daniels, but Westbrook-Ikhine is definitely number 2. A 6'2", 210-pound wide receiver. We have been talking at depth about how Miami's wide receiver room, although very good, needs to add size, needs to add an X wide receiver, a red zone threat to complement Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Westbrook-Ikhine is that. Had 500 yards last season, 9 touchdowns, and was top 15 in the NFL in yards per reception. This guy is a big play machine. He is someone that is going to be a good big body target at wide receiver in the red zone. This is of a player and a type of wide receiver that we've been talking about Miami adding quite a bit. I've also thought that the Dolphins were going to do it in the draft, going in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round for a guy like Nick Nash, Torrey Horton. These type of players are guys that I've circled for Miami to potentially draft. But after signing Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, it feels like Miami has their guy at that wide receiver room. A 4-man group right now that includes a lot of different skill sets that I like. Westbrook-Ikhine, like I mentioned, that red zone, that lengthy X wide receiver. Then you have the 2 studs in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle with the 2nd-year man Malik Washington, the slot wide receiver, the gadget guy, the special teams return man. Braxton Bears left in free agency. Malik Washington will fully fulfill that role this season. I'm excited for this wide receiver group, man. I think it's going to be really solid. I don't think Tyreek Hill's going anywhere this offseason. Do I think it's going to be the last year for Hill in Miami? Yes, but I am excited for him to be back for this season, and I like this group a lot. Hopefully Tua will just be able to play more than 11 games, and we can see these wide receivers put up numbers in what I hope is a bounce-back year for the Dolphins and this Dolphins offense as a whole. So you've seen all of the signings. Tyrel Dodson back, Ifeatu Melifonwu, Ashton Davis, Westbrook Akini, James Daniels, Larry Borum, Zach Wilson, re-signing Quentin Bell, Elijah Campbell, and then the practice squad guy, Matt Dickerson. How would you grade the Dolphins offseason to this point? A, B, C, D, or F? Let me know your thoughts on the entire Dolphins offseason so far. How is Chris Grier doing? Get down in the comment section and give your grades. I answered this before this video yesterday on a different video, and I think I would say a B. I was originally at a B minus C plus type of range, but that was also answering that on our live show before the Dolphins re-signed Tyrel Dodson, before they signed Ashton Davis, and before they signed Nick Westbrook-Akini. So I was just judging it based off the first 6 signings that the Miami Dolphins had. I think I'm at a firm B for the Dolphins. I'm not going to try to write home and say this is the best free agency class of all time for Miami. I'm not going to try to act like that whatsoever, but coming into this deal with $25 million in cap space, you also have to account for Kader Kohou basically being re-signed at 1 year, $3.2 million because of that tender that they placed on him before free agency began. So include him into that group. You bring back Kohou for cheap, Dodson for cheap. You add 2 safeties to make a well-rounded room in Melifonwu and Ashton Davis. You get that wide receiver in Westbrook-Akini. You address back a quarterback with Zach Wilson, and you found a starting right guard on a multi-year contract. I will not complain about that. So I'm at a solid B right now. Next moves I want the Dolphins to make, I would still like to add another veteran offensive lineman, whether it's a Kevin Zeitler, a Brandon Scherf, a Will Hernandez, someone like that I believe could truly start at left guard, so the Dolphins aren't forced into taking a offensive lineman in the first 2 rounds and they can just take best player available. They still need to get a cornerback too. They still need to address that defensive line. That's probably the biggest need, if I'm going to be honest. I know we're talking about safety and corner, but if you had to rank it now, I think defensive line, biggest need, cornerback, left guard is probably that range of what we need here. So I would like to bring back Calais Campbell. That is the next move that I will be kind of pushing the narrative on, and then we'll think about that left guard and cornerback spot as we progress through the offseason. But that's going to do it for today's video. We'll be back later with another video if the Dolphins do make a move, and if the Dolphins don't make a move, we will still have a video as well talking about the latest rumors and news around Miami Dolphins. So hit that sub button, lock us in here at Dolphins Today.